Do you think there is a double standard and or bias towards certain types of queens? And if so, can you give examples?
Mm. I don't think that there's like a more. I'm gonna focus on bias. I don't think there's a bias towards queens between like the queens and the judges. I think there's a bias between like a queen and a queen on the show. Um, like just thinking like, oh, they can't do that. They're too big, or they're successful with that because they're like skinny and get like cake really high. You know what I mean? But not so much between like a judge being like, I'm not going to give a person that role because they can't. I don't think they can execute it because of like their body weight. Let's just focus on that for like that reason.
I would agree with that. I, at least for like, from what I've seen, I don't think the judges really focus in on biases like that. I think it's more of like, if they see potential in you, that's what matters. So they're going to give you that role or that theme based on it. I would say the queens do have biases against each other or fixed stereotypes that they think that they need to fit into. So like as like what Joe said, if they see a bigger queen, they may think that they don't want to give her like a lot of dancing parts if they were doing dancing or choreography for one of the challenges. Just maybe they don't think that she could get it all down because of her weight. So I do think that's a thing. In the same sense that like maybe they see if an older queen sees a younger queen, she's not going to think she's as polished or knows as much as the older queen does, which may later on be proven true. However, they have that bias right off the bat, and I don't necessarily think that's all right. I think you should kind of give everybody a fair chance um, until you get to know them better or see their work through the challenges.
Do you think the judges have a double standard when it comes to a certain type of queen? Like if a queen does like wears a certain type of thing on the runway, it's okay because they do it. But if it's like the thing we see in All Stars too, like the girls are complaining about how Alyssa got away with stuff because it
Yeah.
was Alyssa, and other people get away with stuff because it's them. So do you think the judges do this to like a certain type of girl, or is it just like a certain person or a certain like type of queen, like a runway queen or a comedy queen or a older queen, younger queen?
Um, Honestly, no. I think it's like whatever the judges are like um, feeling particularly on that day. Like another example is like Michelle Visage hates green. If you come down green on the runway, you're gonna get a negative comment from her, regardless. You know, it wouldn't matter if you're someone else or like like let's say like Jixie Mattel came down in green. Jixie Mattel wears pink all the time. If she came down in green, yes, it would be different, but it'll still be a negative comment.
Yeah.
Or like another example is like All Stars 3 when Aja was lip syncing against Billy Creme. Like both of them were serving good lip syncs, but at that moment, the judges really like the comedy style over Aja's dance moves. So like she won. I
Mm-hmm.
just think that it's like what they're feeling on like at that moment.
I would say the same. So, like in the instance for the example that you said about Alyssa, Alyssa's just a funny queen, and like she is widely known, but I also feel like that's not to say that Alyssa doesn't know what she's doing when it comes to fashion. So, like, even if she, like, as I had previously stated, like, what I find is more important, fashion or comedy. In Alyssa's case, like, she can turn out some good outfits, but, like, her character and her being Alyssa Edwards is what sells it at the end of the day. So, even if she, like, even if some queens think that she's wearing an ugly outfit or an outfit that didn't fit that challenge, like, if she's selling it, then at the end of the day, the judges are going to like it because she's so confident in it. That's my opinion on
Okay. Do you see a sort of discrimination against queens of a certain demographic, such as race, age, etc.? And can you give examples?
Not so much on the show. I would say off the show, like on social media or stuff like that. Like like there's no surprise that like out of all the queens that ever participated on Drag Race, only like, well, out of the 10 seasons of winners, um, not counting All Stars, um, there are about 30% of queens who are people of color who had won. And so, like, there's no surprise that there would be a racial difference or stuff like that. Um, but even, like, on the show, there's no signs of, like, age discrimination between, like, older queens, younger queens. Like, they'll make little jokes here and there, but it's not, like, like, discriminating against them.
Yeah. I would say, like, it's jokes, or, like, in that moment, it's a competition, so you're being competitive, so you're going to make snide remarks, but at the end of the day, I don't think on show there's anything that's specifically them trying to discriminate against each other. For outside of the show, I don't necessarily focus too much on the queens, other than viewing pictures, so I don't necessarily follow any social media, so I don't have anything that I would personally know or can say on that aspect. But for the show, I don't think there's any discrimination, no.
In recent months, the Drag Race fandom has become very, very toxic, and one of the controversial issues is sort of discrimination of especially race. There was a thing that came out not too long ago, it was like a couple months ago, about how a lot of the white queens have like over 1 million followers on social media, and then you get to certain black queens and they only have like at the most 50,000. Like you look at the winners and like Violet and like Trixie and all of them have like over 1 million followers, and then you get somebody like Bob, and Bob's like at barely 75. Oh, there's also like the whole like the Tyra Sanchez thing and the Vixen things and the various Vixen things. Um, Also the Jasmine Master stuff, which I forget that was really big. Many things have come out about queens being cyberbullied and harassed. Do you think the show, in a way, promotes this behavior? Has the show done a good job of kind of doing damage control and kind of letting the fandom know that this stuff is not okay? And if they have or if they haven't, however you feel, do you have any suggestions on how they should go about it?
Honestly, I haven't seen the show do much damage control regarding discrimination on race. Um, in fact, I think one of the only few moments where, like, race was heavily talked about for longer than a couple minutes was at the season 10 reunion, with the Vixen starting the conversation with RuPaul and Mayhem, or Asia, not Mayhem. And like, I think that moment was kind of important for a lot of people. I think it was an eye-opening moment for a lot of people who might not view it as discrimination of race a problem on Drag Race. And so I think a way that they can like do that more is to have more conversations about it, and like, there have been few things like press talks at like LA DragCon or New York DragCon, and like other videos posted by like Billboard Pride and like Wow Presents and stuff like that. But I definitely think they can do more, because with all those things they are talking about, the only people that can really find that stuff are people that are looking for it from their time from watching Drag Race. And so I think they can bring those conversations from like those videos on YouTube or like press releases like that into the show, if that makes sense.
I would say that, again, I don't follow anything with social media wise. I have heard about the Jasmine Masters and the Vixen incident, and then just like other issues, not even necessarily within like the Drag Race community of like all the queens, but drag community in general, about race issues. From what I have seen, like the only time I've seen the show really talk about issues where some queens are discriminatory against each other, or their fans are attacking each other. So far, I'm only in season 9, would be like the reunion, where they came out and said that some of Valentina's fans were attacking some of the other queens, and it didn't seem like Valentina was doing anything to kind of stop them. Even though Valentina knows that it was never from a harsh place that the queens were critiquing her, because they all critique each other, period. So the queens did call Valentina out on that. It never was resolved within that reunion episode. I don't know if it was ever resolved afterwards, but I have seen issues with that. I would say the show doesn't necessarily go out of its way to clear up any issues that queens have when it comes to discrimination against race, or, you know, any privilege that some queens have over each other. I do think it holds breeding grounds for such discussions, but that could be flipped negatively and positively. So it's how those people want to view it. Drag Race is watched by so many people, whether they're in the community, the queer community, or not. So some people in the queer community can watch this show and see it as a great opportunity to talk about the positive aspects and how we can stop privilege, change the way that we view each other, and then people that might not be in the community or vice versa, even if they are, you know, it all depends on their point of view, could then watch the show and decide that they want to take it in the negative light and continue to discriminate. So, like, if one queen of theirs, like, if you have a person and their favorite queen so happens to be white and has beef with a queen that's a person of color, that could breed grounds for, like, negative actions of how they perceive the queens of color and etc. So I don't think they really go out of their way to create situations where they're going to discriminate each other, but I also don't think the show goes out of their way to create situations to help it as well, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Do you think there's a perception of queens of color on the show? Because it seems that a lot of queens of color have the angry kind of black girl kind of stigma, and even though a lot of girls try to like steer away from that, it still somehow seems to be twisted in that sort of way. Kind of like what we've seen like with the Vixen and Eureka, kind of how like she didn't want anything to do with Eureka, but it was constantly like she constantly kept having to talk about it, or she in some way, shape, or form had to deal with Eureka. Mm-hmm. And then in the end, I don't know if it was editing or if it was just the way the conversation went, but as you can see on the reunion, it kind of made her look like the bad guy, when in all actuality, it was not just on one person. It was kind of both of them played a part in it.
You know, I think a lot of that has to do with society. You know, there's society who constantly view black people, more specifically black women, to be angry, and so I can see how that can correlate between black women and black drag queens. A lot to do of it has to do with trauma, for like believing that, or people always like looking at you as the angry person when you're not actually at all. I think that heavily relates with the Vixen case, that she just felt like wherever she goes, she'll always be this. She'll always be labeled as this whenever she walks into a room. And so I think like with trauma and society, both of those things go hand in hand. And so when we watch Drag Race, we also connect what's happening in the show with what's happening in the world.
Yeah. I would say, just from what I've seen on the show, again, like whether it's editing or not, I feel like in my opinion, all the queens are in the show to win. That's the point of the game. But some queens of color can be portrayed as harsher than their white counterparts on the show, in the sense that, like, in my opinion, I thought Trinity Taylor was very fierce and very competitive throughout the show, and I didn't enjoy the way that she seemed portrayed to me. But at the end of the day, that's what you have to do in order to win. I would say, in the flip side of that, though, it could be seen that Shay was bitchy, but at the end of the day, she was doing the same thing that Trinity was. So I would say that there's those situations where, you know, some queens that are really just sticking to what they believe in, their morals, and how they want to win the game, and how they know they need to win the game at the end of the day. It can be perceived as mean or aggressive, but it's the same thing across the board, and I can see that it gets, in my mind, I think it gets tweaked, and I think Joe's correct that a lot of the time you want to mix what's happening in real life with these shows. So if society is giving you the image that black women or people of color are angry and aggressive, some people can decide that they want to transition that into the show and view them in that light as well. So at the end of the day, it's understanding that you don't know anybody's story, you don't know where they're coming from, and it's hard to get that from reality TV.